and welcome to the Lakes Radio. Today we'll be discussing pollution in the Great Lakes and some of the ways we can help solve the problem. We will have an interview with Joseph Atkinson, an expert on pollution in the Great Lakes from the University of Buffalo in New York. And here's your host, Griffin Hammond and Dalton Leachoff.
Thank you for the great introduction, David. Now, imagine that if you go to the beach for a nice quick swim, you dive in and all you see is that plastic bottle you threw in the parking lot before you walked onto the beach. Now, think about it. If everyone did the exact same thing, the lakes would become unbearable. These freshwater beaches that are part of the Great Lakes are combined for around 20% of the entire world's freshwater supply, which is why keeping them clean is of utmost importance. The location of each lake plays a role in the number and type of contaminants each one is plagued with. Lake Superior tends to have fewer contaminants than any other lake, due to it being a less developed area.
Can you elaborate on how the location makes a difference? Well, that's a great question, Nick. First off, Lake Superior is around an area that's not very developed, so they don't have very many contaminants that go into their lake. Unlike Lake Michigan, which is surrounded by urban development, so they have a lot of mills and factories that pollute the lakes, especially around the Chicago area.
All right, Dave. The lakes, Lake Huron in Ontario, they're also like urban area lakes, and they also do have a great amount of pollution in them because they're so populated around. But Lake Erie, on the other hand, it's small, but that one has a lot of agricultural pollutants from farming and whatnot. This means that the primarily pollutants in the lake stem from fertilizers and pesticides. And now we'll move along to the interview with Joe Atkinson and Griffin Hammond.
Hello, this is Joe Atkinson.
What are the major water pollutants?
So there are two classes of water pollutants, at least the way I look at it. They're all chemical based, but the one class is related to eutrophication. Do you know that? Are you familiar with that word?
We are not.
Okay, I'll spell it because it's kind of a weird spelling. It's EUTROPHICATION.
Okay.
Eutrophication. And eutrophication refers to a process in aquatic environments that results when there's too much fertilization. And by fertilization, if you think of putting fertilizer on your lawn or on plants and all that, it's the same thing for aquatic plants like algae.
Okay.
And it usually consists of phosphorus and nitrogen. And typically in the Great Lakes, phosphorus tends to be the main problem. And when there's too much, the Great Lakes are in a state called phosphorus limited growth. So that means if you put more phosphorus in the water, more growth will occur. And when I'm talking about growth, I'm talking about primarily algae.
Okay. And then if we don't correct these problems, what kind of long-term effects could we see in the future?
Are you aware of what's called Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement?
We are not.
Okay, so if you're doing this, you ought to probably think about framing this whole discussion in terms of what's the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. This was an agreement between the United States and Canada that was signed initially in 1972, and it's been revisited and revised since then, I think twice. And the reason it was formulated in the first place was because of eutrophication problems. So you may have heard of the expression that people used to say about Lake Erie, that Lake Erie is dead. And this is a situation in the 1960s and early 70s, and it was a result of over-fertilization, as I described earlier. So that's the kind of situation that could occur if a problem like over-fertilization by phosphorus isn't corrected. We're not in that situation anymore because one of the results of the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement is that it it greatly reduced the phosphorus loading into the phosphorus introduction into the lakes.
Okay.
And that helped. That helped quite a bit. But actually, PCBs are not being loaded into the lakes anymore either. So in general, the lakes are in much better shape than they were 50 years ago. But also, if you keep putting bad things into the water, something that eventually the lake is going to respond in a way that we probably are not happy with.
PCBs have been used in factories since the 1930s due to their high heat tolerance. PCBs vaporize in water quite easily due to their low vapor pressures. PCBs tend to attach to the surface of organic materials such as clay and microparticles that are still suspended in the water or have already settled down. And then with the PCB being in water, which speeds up the evaporation process, which will release it into the air, which will then cause possibilities for all living organisms to get cancer.
Thank you for listening to Dull Lakes Radio. It was great having you all with us today. Now let's go float on the lake, and y'all just keep relaxing and living life.